Thank you for the beautiful day you've given to us with sunshine and fresh air and the transformation of fall. And Father, as we sit at this table and have this conversation with these young men, I just pray that your Holy Spirit would be present, that you would open our hearts and our minds, and that the journey that these young men are on, if this could be part of their life, that you would make that a possible thing for them. And thank you for the privilege of sitting at this table. It's humbling in the name of Jesus. Amen. First of all, I want you to know I love this school. Enjoyed it immensely. I came here with 4 children and survived for the most part. I think the kids did better than we did. So in our life experience, there's 2 things I want to share with you. One of them is that I am a 3rd generation Seventh-day Adventist, and in my experience growing up in the church and stepping away from the church, I had the opportunity to read a book that my sister bought at the Auburn camp meeting many, many years ago. I mean, a long time ago. And I was in the process of making my journey back to the church. And the one thing that stood out to me clearly in that book was something about the story of Jesus and about who God was that I had actually never heard before. Even though I was a 3rd generation member of this church, my grandmother was a Bible worker in Eastern Washington, Soap Lake of all places, Ephrata, which is a small area. My dad was the only one of 6 brothers and 1 sister that actually joined the Adventist church. And what I read was so amazing. It was a book called Lessons on Faith. And it was written, actually it was a book put together of articles by Dr. Ford and his wife many years ago, about 1977. And they put together a collection of stories about a transformation that was taking place in the Adventist church in the late 1800s. Okay? Some would say some of the conversations were taking place as early as 1886. They kind of begin to build momentum up until 1888, and we're still continuing to build momentum after that. In fact, Ellen White wrote about this up to the point at which she passed. So what we have to offer you is a scholarship. And this scholarship is a research scholarship. It is, in one sense, a competitive scholarship. And maybe the competition is against yourself, it's not against other students. And that is that we have put together with our board, with Screaming Rock Media, a series of things that we would require from you, okay? And Sherry was kind enough to say that if you will do this diligently and work on it a little bit every week, it makes it a lot easier than trying to do it during spring break. But it is a busy project, okay? And so we have put together just a simple introduction here, and this is all online for you. The application is online. But if you just turn it over to the next page, okay, on the back side, these are the requirements we just kind of like to walk through with you. There's a date of October 31st. That means that we'd like to have the applications in. With a group of 4, I wouldn't think that shouldn't be too much of a problem. Sometimes there are emergencies, and our board has been generous, may I say, but we really didn't want students signing up far beyond that because it is a larger project than you realize, okay? And Sherry's email address is in there so that you can communicate. She takes care of all the paperwork, and this is Sherry right here. Say hi to Sherry. If you go to part 2 of the outline, the successful applicant will schedule regular time, and this is where Sherry's being like really encouraging to you guys. All right? And then she has numbered through all of the projects starting with 00, and she's going to give you a flash drive with almost all of the research on it. In fact, Sherry, isn't all of it on there now? Okay. And I'll walk through some of that information with you here in just a moment. The project centers around a message that James and Ellen White had felt a burden before this message emerged. But it didn't come necessarily just from them, Jones and Wagner were editors for the Sign magazine, West Coast guys, which is a nice compliment. We're West Coast people, right? And the Lord had just given them a remarkable understanding of the gospel. And they had begun to write about it in the Signs. In fact, when you go to the 1888 General Conference, you'll read through some of the presentations that Dr. Wagner presented that are absolutely just amazing and beautiful presentations on the gospel, okay? And what Ellen White wrote, and she felt very inspired when she wrote this, and that this was the message that God had brought to our church to fulfill what we would call the third angel's message. She said to fulfill it in verity, in 19th century English would mean today the message was in reality the one that would finish the work. Because in that gospel work was the most wonderful understanding about what the work of Jesus was for humanity, and in that final preparation for the second coming. And this would be a message that would lighten the entire earth with the glory of God. And I will say that the reason it lightens the earth with the glory of God is because it doesn't lighten the earth with the glory of man. It is about what God is able to do in us and through us, through the person of Jesus Christ. And so what we have put together for you is an opportunity to go back and look at the stories and listen carefully to, we have put in almost 2,000 pages of letters that Ellen White wrote to church leadership. And what's really wonderful about those letters is you begin to get a picture of your church that is most remarkable. And what I mean by that is that there were people who were totally opposed to preaching this message or even having it preached. They were some of her very best friends. And so you get those letters in which she is writing to her dear friends and trying to encourage and plead, but at the same time she's leaving their integrity intact and she is being respectful of their position, and allowed them in those positions all the way through the conversation. And I thought, that is a really remarkable picture of church leadership in that sense. There was no name calling, there was no accusation, but you could just get a sense of the heart cry and how she understood the importance of the message. We do not want you to read all 2,000 pages of those letters, okay? But what I would really encourage you to do, I like to use a term called recreational reading, and that means that you just start some of those letters scanning through them. And when a story in that first paragraph may catch your attention, just take time to listen to the words. And you'll begin to get a sense of the importance of this message and how she felt about it. So I think that's really a positive thing. But don't get overwhelmed with that, and please do not neglect your Greek class because you read some of those letters, okay? Top priority is to get your classes done this year, okay? That's got to be a given. But we also included a number of other books I'll go through in just a moment. What we have tried to do, just in the big picture, is give you Ellen White's experience in her personal letters. Then we have added, this year, we added Exodus, and in that book, it was published in 1937, and how do I explain this book? This is where the church was at from about 1937 into the 1940s, okay? And Taylor Bunch was conference president for 2 conferences. He was a professor, he was a pastor, and he did a remarkable comparison of Israel and how it related to the experience of the Adventist church. Okay? In fact, Dwight Nelson just quoted that as a book he was working through here just a few months ago in one of his sermons from Andrews. And so you kind of get a rich history from the 1930s. And then we included another work that was actually written in 1952. It was a confidential manuscript that was not actually supposed to leave the General Conference for a committee that was being developed to study the message, okay? I happen to know a person who knew the secretary who started making copies and giving it to her friends. She is now passed, I can say this. And she was in Auburn, California. And somehow that manuscript managed to get places it was not supposed to be. But we put a copy of the revised version of that, okay, that went through a series of committees with the General Conference. And I think that went up into maybe the 1990s. So we feel we've kind of given you a sketch from about the 1988 on up to the 1990s. The reason we're doing this is that there are more than one points of view of justification by faith. There is a false justification by faith, and I think that article is by Ellen White. We included that in here. Faith can become a work, just like anything else can become, okay? Our desire is this. We want to see our young ministers and Bible teachers and chaplains have an opportunity, in addition to their other studies, to just enrich their lives with this message in the hopes that it will find a healthy balance, okay? And what I mean by that is that in all churches there's a pendulum that swings from conservative to moderate, and I don't know if we use the L word or not, okay? And in that process, what our board is hoping is that if we offer a scholarship with an opportunity to take some extra time and study this, that it would contribute something rich and wonderful to your ministry, okay? And there are groups, you know, the one ministry is going on, and that's spreading pretty big, and it's centered around this message. And so our hope is that it will be a blessing to you, and that it would bring balance to your life. And for that, we're willing, if you're willing to do the research and to read through some of the materials that are given to where you can come to an understanding, we ask you to write a paper, okay? And we've outlined that here. I'll cover that in a moment. We would like you then to preach a sermon about this topic, and we would also like to know what it means to you. We'll come back and do an interview and say, tell us, how did this message speak to you? And that's a very personal thing, okay? Nobody can give that to you. That has to be something that happens to you in the process of the journey. We want to see the message find its equilibrium and its balance in a healthy way. And the best way to find that is to go on this journey and spend some time knowing where we come from, where you are at in the present, and then we ask one more thing. We ask you to look to the future and say, how will this impact the future of our church in a healthy and positive way? Okay, and that's what our board is about. It's pretty simple. And the demographics are, our board is 35-year-old mom, 2 kids, retired attorney, retired medical personnel staff. Sherry and I are on the board. And there are others that one is a preacher's son, who's a member of our board, who is also a graduate at Walla University, okay? Walla College in the day. And, you know, that's Wes. And so we're just pretty much a normal group of people, okay? In fact, Wes has been doing some lay pastoring, in fact, and sort of enjoying that, even though his dad pastored an Upper Columbia conference. My goodness, when he attended Upper Columbia Academy when my sister went there, which is a long time ago. Yeah, okay. Leaving that alone, as older sister, okay. Yes, and again, it's just an open invitation. If you're willing to go on this journey, and let's take a look at the essay, okay? Can we go down? I just sort of covered the research. There are other books in there for you that are listed. Again, our expectation is you will not read all of those books in their entirety, but you will take time to spend understanding what it is that is important to you. We give you freedom on that, lots of it. Wouldn't this be a great class? No. Just whatever you feel like. No. Okay. But if you go to number 3, there is a 6-page paper, and that paper is probably a very critical part of the scholarship. And what I tried to do this year, because we're moving it towards Andrew, is to set it up in sequence. Now, I'm going to say this, it's on tape, it'll be online. When I say one page on each, it doesn't mean I want you to start page 1 with just that. I want you to do an introduction, but then equivalent to a page. Type page might be 450 words, somewhere in that neighborhood, maybe more depending on your font. But I need a comfortable discussion from you on each of the topics. Okay, that's all. And if you can do it in 3 paragraphs and you're comfortable with that, you're not going to get docked for not having the 451 words. If it's 300, yeah, okay. So you understand the principle here, is that you're able to concise and in a concise manner and in clear words express what it is you understand. So let's go through the topics, okay? 1 page on the biblical theology of justification through faith or by faith alone, okay? Page 2 is how is it understood by Ellen G. White, E.J. Wagner, and A.T. Jones. How did they understand this message? And so you can see where 3 paragraphs there would probably cover that if you're following good principles of writing. Of course, by now you're expert writers, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
You can almost write a whole essay on number 2.
You could do a whole essay on any one of
You
these.
should probably write a book.
Yeah, yeah. In fact, there are several. In fact, we list some of those in that are already published within our denomination, okay? Then another one is a page on the nature of Christ and its relevance to the message. And what I think is important about that is you had Jones, who was very, very strong on Christ as the Son of Man. Wagner probably was more emphasis on Christ as the Son of God. Okay? So you have that conversation within some of the writings there. And a balanced view on who Christ is significant in how the gospel is presented.
It's one of the oldest questions Christianity has struggled with.
Yeah, we just want 1 page on it. or like I say, with wisdom. All right. Then, because we've sort of given you a scope on the history, we would like to have you address that as 1 page on how this message has journeyed from the onset in the first paragraph, the second paragraph. How did it grow? Maybe what were some of the tensions between some of the sides? Then where are we at today would maybe be your 3rd paragraph. And then how you see this in the future maybe is your 4th. Okay? And again, the importance is using words to say what you mean. This is not where you want to wander. You want to, again, very concise, simple language, okay?
And these pages, these are single-spaced, full pages.
I didn't say that. A word is standard 1.5 lines per page, okay? If you're just using a typical Word file, I'm comfortable with that. If you need it different, you may, but we're not trying to overburden you. But we need to know that you understand what you're talking about. Is that fair?
Yep.
Okay. Absolutely.
That's a good gauge.
Yeah, yeah, and thus far I can say that this is our 3rd year. The papers have been very interesting. Sometimes they're a bit light, but I think our board, in sitting down and reading those papers, we've had many positive and very lively discussions. And when you put the board together and listen to the conversation, it's amazing how each board member is seeing something different in those papers. Okay, we should someday record those conversations. So if you're understanding what you're writing about, it comes through. And in some of the papers, sometimes they didn't get to the point to the last sentence, and a good paragraph always states the thesis in the first sentence.
Yeah.
Just a hint, okay? Saves a lot of reading and a lot of writing. Okay, moving ahead. We had number 4 I just covered on the importance of emphasizing the message today. How can we bring this message about in a way, and I think this is really significant, in a way that is healthy, okay? It has been at times contentious within our church. I think it can be presented in a way without contention. Now, the gospel always creates a natural tension because we have a human nature, okay? That is just simply the nature of the message. At the same time, is there a way that we can address this? And you guys are young, you think things have never crossed my mind, you know your generation. And what we're looking for is, you know, can you write out a simple vision of how you could see this happening, all right? And then number 6 is the last one. What is the personal impact on you? Have you gone through the experience? What's going on inside of here? Okay, personal. And that can be as short and as brief as you would like it to be. So that last page, if it's a half page, one person said, can I do 7 pages? And we said, do you have to? And I think we ended up, was it 6.5? I'm not sure. Something like that. But, you know, we could have sent him to the writing lab or something, but we didn't do that. And then email the essay. It comes through. Sherry then distributes that out to the board members. All I can say is that there are some people who sit on the outer edge of our board that will read this that are very significant scholars, just for the record, okay? And then we always get some interesting feedback on that as well. Okay. Any questions on this?
Not yet.
Okay. All right. The sermon. We ask that you work with the department, with the local churches, and we have had sermons recorded on iPhones come through just really, really nice. Okay. But we ask that you do a sermon and then record that, upload it. We have an account with YouTube, and we give you, when you're done, you let us know. Or I think Sherry asked for that information in advance. Then she sends you the code to upload that, and then that goes out to our board members. Okay? And you might also want to know that we send that to a number of conference presidents in the union. Okay? And so all I'm saying is you sort of get a nice introduction. And we get emails and comments back from them. Okay? So, you know, it's a nice way to, I don't want to say market yourself, but it puts you out there and lets people know that you have a love and appreciation for the gospel and that you're out there preaching. And then we come up and do a final interview and tape that interview, and then we take all of that and sit down as a board and we make our decision on the scholarships. And you know, it's a $5,000 scholarship, so it's enough to get you in the door that senior year. That's a nice help. I remember a $1,000 scholarship got me in my senior year. I will never forget that. Okay, and it was a pleasant and delightful surprise. And so our board is excited about doing this, and what you choose to do is going to be entirely up to you. How do you feel?
Well, I'm excited about this. I remember once sitting in on I'm not sure your experience has been with Ty Gibson, but once I sat in on one of his talks, and he was talking about A.T. Jones and E.J. Wagner, and it was one of those moments in my life when I was really, this has been a subject that has torn me apart at a very core level. I've had a lot of questions, a lot of struggles, and hearing briefly A.T. Jones and E.J. Wagner's perspective was revolutionary in my life, and it started me on a path that brought me out of a lot of struggles. So I'm excited on having that thumb drive of resources almost just in and of itself right there, and then being able to take some time and having like a little bit of a reward, a little bit of motivation to actually take some time to look over that and understand it a little better. I'm looking forward to that. Yeah.
Excellent.
And this is a subject that I want to preach for the rest of my life. So. Yeah.
Okay. Well, we hope that it's a healthy and positive journey. You have an amazing staff here, and we encourage you to talk with your department heads here, and any questions, any dialogue, any communication that you have, I think are also included on the stick. I don't see that entire list here, but we put in the articles that were published in the review for the anniversary of 1888. We tried to give you kind of a full spectrum of it, knowing that your time is limited. Okay. But enough to give you a sense of some of the conversations that have gone on in the church. Okay. And then with the staff that you have here, you can ask them any questions you want. We've encouraged the students to dialogue amongst themselves. I don't think we've seen a lot of clones in the papers, but there's oftentimes you'll see a similar sentence, which we're not offended by at all, because we could tell that there had been some internal dialogue, and in that consistency came out of it. So I think that was really positive. Okay? Any other thoughts on it? Questions?
I'm pretty excited for it too. I've heard about this since my freshman year. And my freshman year, I looked into it more and studied it, just briefly. So I'm excited to dive deeper in.
Excellent.
Yeah, it'll be
Okay.
good.
So, Sherry, before we close, is there anything you want to add to this or not? Did I miss anything? Feeble-minded in my old age.
No, I think we're doing good. Yeah.
Okay, excellent. Then I'm going to have a short prayer, and we can, Father, we thank you for these few minutes.